Welcome to the Podfather, not me. This week I have a guest with me as well. But before I introduce my guest, I just want to, you see my QR code if you're on BitChute, YouTube, and Rumble. If you're interested in doing a podcast tour or start a podcast or listen to my 6 other podcasts or even get a virtual assistant, go to VA World, va.world, and all my stuff is on roycon.com. My guest, dynamic podcaster, speaker, and coach dedicated to empowering women to share their stories through podcasting. With a doctorate in organizational psychology and a background spanning over 15 years in higher education, she hosts 2 podcasts. The first, The Story of My Pet, highlighting inspiring tales of pets and their parents while advocating for animal rescue, fostering, and adoption, which I love because I love when someone has a podcast that has a mission. And then your news podcast, Podcaster Story, features your own personal stories as well as the journeys of other female podcasters, and provides practical guidance for being an awesome podcast guest and launching and growing your podcast. Please welcome Julie Marty-Pearson.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here and talk all things podcasting.
Oh, definitely. And I suppose I'll start off. I always like people's backgrounds because you've got a beautiful background. So for those that are watching, is that always been your background when you started, or has things evolved as you went along?
It's definitely evolved. So I got into podcasting about 4 years ago, and the story of my pet was where I started. And as I've grown and developed, I realized that I just love happy animal art. And so it started with a couple, and now it's a whole wall, and there's even more you can't see. But I also find it's a great conversation starter when I meet people and they go, "Oh, look at your background." So I love that. So it makes me happy when I'm on Zoom to see all these photos behind me because they're behind me most of the day when I'm working, and I just love sharing that with other people when I get to meet them on Zoom.
And I suppose we might just start on that because I haven't covered this before, but I think the background, because some people, what they do is they'll just blur the background and they have their picture. But the reality is we're trying to grab people's attention. And if they're in the video, and I mean, if somebody just comes along and just sees this, they're seeing a lot of colors and everything. And they're like, what's going on here? And as opposed to if we just had a fake background or something blur and everything. So is that something that you teach your people, you encourage them to do as well?
Absolutely. It's funny because when I do meet someone new or I'm on a networking event, I always say, and I'm introducing myself and I say, I have 2 podcasts, The Story of My Pet. And I always like to go, might explain my background if you were wondering. So it's also kind of a little intro, but I've also learned that the great thing about being in this online world and in podcasting is you get to show up as you and who you are and show your personality. And so for me, coming from higher education where I didn't get to have an office like this, I get to kind of show who I am and what inspires me and what keeps me going. I love art. I love, these are all different pieces from lots of different places. And I always tell my clients, whether you're a guest or a host, you really want to show yourself and give a sense of who you are, but also have a screen that's welcoming because this is all people see of you, right? So I definitely tell people to take advantage of that. And personally, I don't like the backgrounds because what I found as a woman with different hairstyles, it kind of makes my head look weird sometimes when I blur it or have something else. So, just little things like that I like to give my friends and clients tips about.
Yeah, and one that I have is, I mean, I have the green screen. I have a throw as well that goes over that, and that's real. That's my bookshelf. But sometimes I can wear a different color shirt that kind of clashes out with the thing, and yeah, it's just, and then I'd have to go in and change it before we go on to record. Yeah, so just
Right.
small little things, but they can make a difference.
Yes, especially if they're things that we don't have to do extra work to fix.
Thanks.
We don't need to make more work for ourselves.
So with the pets, because it's it's a kind of feel good factor, but it's also kind of, I suppose, like you're encouraging people to, hey, adopt an animal or different things, plus the stories. And with me, like whether it's a guest that I'm helping who's kind of talking about mental health, or if it's a podcast, that's helping the betterment of mankind. That's where I get a load of energy from. I love doing that. And I'm just curious with you, do you like when you know something is actually for the betterment of people, do you get more inspired or it's more enjoyable doing them ones?
Absolutely. First of all, I love talking about animals, and I've found most people do too. But, I started it for fun, kind of to get into podcasting and see if I like it. And I quickly realized that even though I consider myself an animal advocate, I knew just a small amount of what the reality of animal rescue and shelters and all of that really is. So for me, it's actually been a learning experience. I learned from my guests, but it's also been inspiring me. So yeah, I call it my passion project because it doesn't directly relate to my coaching business, but I stay passionate about it because if I help one person to adopt or to foster or volunteer, whatever they want to do, then I feel like like you said, it's the betterment of the world, and that really does keep me inspired. And I just find that people have such incredible stories, but not a lot of ways to share them. And so getting to meet my guests who work in all these different ways with animals or volunteer, I get inspired by what they've done and how it's changed their life. And so I really do get motivated by it. I really enjoy that podcast. I love interviewing people from all over the world. And it's always shocking to me when I get people to reach out and want to be on. And I've met so many incredible people, but it also keeps going because I've realized so many people don't really understand. And so if I can help educate in that process of sharing these stories, that really is inspiring and motivating to me for sure.
Good. And which kind of your journey? I mean, you said 4 years that you're podcasting. Like I know for me, I go back and I kind of cringe, and then plus lighting has improved, cameras improved. There's a lot of things that have improved, acoustics and everything. And we were just talking prior to recording, like I played around with a load of different things, bigger introductions, then I had music, and there was one with the Polish when I had a beatboxer, and it was when I removed it after a few years, so many people wrote in and thanked me, but not one person told me they didn't like it before that, which was strange. And you just assume, and sometimes we're kind of copying something because we think this is the norm, and everyone has their own style and whatever works for you. But
Right.
like what we kind of discussed and what I'm doing, like that's why I've kind of done the intro and just kind of told what I'm doing, and then later as well, rather than inserting it. And not, because the thing is, there's a lot of work in actually preparing for the interview, but then when you're doing the inserting and then making sure everything matches up, and it's a lot more added to it, and the most things you can take away from it, but still have a quality podcast. So your own journey, I'm just curious what you've played with and what things you've learned.
So when I first started my first podcast, the Pet Stories, it was very low end tech wise. I didn't have a ring light. I realized pretty quickly I had bad lighting. I used to be facing the wall and I have windows behind me. So the whole time on video, the lighting would change and it was just bad. But I started messy. I like to say I had been taught how to edit audio through Audacity. So that's all I did. I had Audacity, I had a cheap mic, I didn't have great lighting, and I just started and have learned along the way. And I have found little things can make a big difference. Like I now have a mic that is not super expensive. I think it's like $60. And it makes a big difference because it's specifically made for this kind of scenario and recording. So yeah, it's definitely been evolution. I still use Zoom even though I've tried other things. But what I love is learning from other people because I'm not going to go out there and spend the time researching if somebody else has already figured out what's the best. So yeah, so definitely been an evolution. Before I started my podcast, I had never done any kind of video editing or audio editing. So that's probably been the biggest learning curve for me. It just is learning and figuring out which software and tech is the easiest. And I always tell people I'm never going to suggest something I haven't used because I want to make sure it works and there aren't major issues. And I can say for sure that this works for me and it doesn't add more time. It actually makes it quicker. That's really important to me.
And with Audacity, and it happens with a lot of software, like Podpage is another one. Like there's a load of things that are brilliant, but sometimes, especially if you're early on, they keep changing things and you just get used to it. That's painful because you know exactly what system you're using, how to do it, and then all of a sudden all the buttons change or they call it something else. And I presume you've
Right.
experienced that as well.
Oh my goodness. I would say, and before anybody gets upset, I love Descript. I use it. It's so great for video editing with just, using the transcript. But I feel like they are updating new things almost every day. And every time I go in there, I'm like, wait, that button's not there now. Where do that is a hard part with tech because I feel like in the beginning of my journey, tech wasn't changing that fast. Maybe every 6 months or a year, something new would be out. But now I feel like every month, whether it's Descript or Podpage, which I use for my pet podcast and love. But I've always also realized I'm not using all the things I could be using because there are so many offerings now. And I definitely have seen that with AI. When I started, you had to pay a lot of money just to get a transcript of your audio. And now I can get it 5 different places. I just have to pick which one I want to use. So, which I love. We have so many options now, and the cost for a lot of that is less, but it can also be overwhelming because you feel like you're not even using everything you have access to the fullest benefit. And I know that that can be overwhelming for new podcasters, right? They're like, well, I have to do a blog and a newsletter and Substack and LinkedIn. It's like, no, 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 no. Start here and add as you grow. Because even those of us that have been doing this for years, we're always seeing new things and we don't always have time to test it out or add it to our process. So, that is definitely, I would say, a challenge, but I'm happy we're at the point now where we have more options than less. I don't know about how you feel about that, but I definitely love that we have so many opportunities and so many of the podcasting companies like Podpage, like Descript, like Buzzsprout, they have really great customer service and they send out great tips and support. And I think that is really the biggest part of podcasting I appreciate is people going the extra mile to support us and help us utilize what they offer.
And I think that's important as well because, like Podbean, fantastic. They like if the Polish one on that, they're reaching out and like within hours, it's incredible. But Spotify, which when they were Anchor, brilliant, very fast resolve it.
Mm.
Spotify are terrible, like very slow. And I'm like on the fence, like thinking it's a competitive advantage. I like having the video on it because I watch a load of the like Joe Rogan or Patrick Bet David or different ones, and I watch the video as well, so I can have it playing. And when they're showing a graphic or something, it's just handy because you can't be doing anything else when YouTube is on, but you can be listening away with that. So everything has its kind of pros and cons. So the script, I'd like to go into that because I remember seeing it and I think I played around with it, but never went deep into it. You might tell people what exactly can you do with the script and like how you felt it's kind of benefiting you.
Yeah, so when I first started, like I said, I used Audacity and then I can't even remember the names. The people who I was getting support from with my podcast were really about the audio, which I loved, so I know how to do it. But as video became so much more prominent in podcasting, I'm like, well, I'm recording on Zoom. I have these videos. I need to do something with them, right? So I'd heard of Descript. I had a friend who had me use it to help her out with something. And what I love about it is so you can upload audio only, you can upload video, you can record inside of it. So you can use it in a lot of ways. It is a little different than some other software. It is web-based. So obviously you have to have a Wi-Fi signal to be able to use it. But the great thing about it is everything in it is basically in a cloud storage. So it's also a great place to store all your episodes. And so I love that too. But I would say the one 3 selling points for me that I tell my new clients is one, you don't have to learn how to be a video editor. So in Descript, you're shown your video, and right next to it, it transcribes all the audio. So you have a transcript. Well, what's great about it is you can go in the transcript and highlight a single word, a whole sentence, a whole paragraph, and delete it. And then the video is edited by that. So you don't have to mess with a lot of the more technical stuff with video editing. So it's a really
Brilliant because
great.
when you're doing it, like you split it and then you're trying to
Yes.
match it. So that's a great feature.
Yeah, and it's not perfect, but for brand new podcasters, people who've never done any kind of editing, it's very user friendly. And so that's like the one big selling point for me. The other thing is there's a magic button where you can remove all the filler words. So it automatically finds and ands and all the different things. And you can actually select what you want removed and what you don't. Like, some of it is part of natural conversation, but it's a magic button. And like a few seconds later, it's all gone. And so, I mean, talk about time saver. And then they also have some really great overall things you can just get your sound better quality without having to go in and mess with the sound levels. So I really like it from that perspective. It definitely saves me time, but I've also found with brand new podcasters, it's very user friendly. Um, the only negative I would say is because they give us so much and update so often, you basically have to update your version every time you go in so things are working correctly. But I'd say that's better than not having all the options for sure.
What's the price point of Descript? Is it a kind of monthly, yearly thing? Is it one of these ones you get 2 months free when you pay for the year, kind of?
I do believe there is a free startup. I've been using it a while now. I believe mine is either $30 or $35 a month. So very economical, and there's no limit. So I know some places you get so much based on how you pay, like you can only upload up to 3 hours or 6 hours or something. So they don't limit that. So I honestly I can upload 10, 20 hours in a month, and I don't have to pay more for that. So that's
That's
another
brilliant because with
benefit.
Podbean, it was okay for me because they were small episodes, they're 5, 10 minutes, and it was like a 3 hour limit. But it got expensive but like say The Awakening, some of my episodes, and that could be 2 hours. So you couldn't, but I know, as you mentioned, there's a lot of AI now that does it. And regarding the shorts then, because there's a load of free software out there for shorts, but I found I was spending so much time that I just get my team now to do it. And I kind of make a list when I'm editing it. I put down the different times when I'd
Yeah.
want that short to be. But I found the software to create the shorts, it was just sucking so much time. I'm just curious, you creating shorts and how are you doing it?
I will be honest, I don't do it enough. Video and reels has never been my strong suit just because I mean, I like that content as a viewer, but I guess from my perspective, I do feel like it's a time suck because then I start tweaking and all of that. So, two things I do is one, Buzzsprout is my podcast host, and which also has these embedded AI features that help with time saving. But you can pick a soundbite and they will generate a short soundbite type of reel for you. And so I love that because that's not much work at all. In Descript, you can do shorts and they have some new AI things that you can pull it out pretty easily. So I like that. And the other thing I love about Descript is they have templates. So you can look at their shorts and reel templates, find one you like, and then just pull your info in. So all those tweaks aren't as needed because it's a template and they have it ready to go for you. So when I have done it, I've used that and that has really helped me a lot for sure.
I know you talk about how to be an awesome guest. And I mean, some people, they don't want to start the podcast. They just want to go on the show. And I always say, you kind of bring your A game as well, because sometimes people, I mean, you've experienced that, but some people just turn up, they don't even know what they're there for. They're just doing a tour and they're going around. So it's hurting the industry the way some people are doing it. And, like they don't even have a chat. They just turn out, they don't even chat beforehand. They just, they're gone. Just as you're ending it. Sometimes as you're doing the outro, they're gone. And there's other times then you'll have a decent conversation. So I'd love to know your take on that.
Yeah, so talking about podcast guesting really over the last year has come from the realization of people I meet and in networking or however, probably at least 75% of them ask me about guesting versus launching. So I realize a lot of, especially women business owners who are starting out or they're trying to grow their business, they're not ready for the full podcasting. They want to utilize guesting, but either they've never done it before or they've done it once or twice and they're not sure. So my work with that has really stemmed from people asking me those questions kind of over and over. And I agree, as a host, you know, we put all this effort into having someone on our podcast utilize our platform to kind of promote whatever they do. If they're not giving us the effort, whether in the interview or after by marketing it, that can be really frustrating. So I kind of come at it from both perspectives of like how to be a good guest, but also what I've learned as a host of what I want guests to do and how I want them to be ready and available. So a lot of it is, it's funny, somebody said this to me, is the assumption. My assumption is you want to be a guest, you're going to show up ready. You're going to have a room that doesn't have a lot of noise. You may have a nice mic, but we can't assume that, right? I've even heard people go, well, I showed up and I had no idea they were recording video, or I had no idea this was going to be live streamed. So little things like that is really helping people to realize what you need to be prepared for and what you should ask if they're not telling you, right? So if you get set up, like, wait, can you tell me, is this video? Can you tell me how long? All of those kind of things. So being an awesome guest is a lot of different aspects, but one is just how to find podcasts, how to approach them, what information you need to have ready to provide for them, whether it's a one sheet or your website or a list of, you have your bio and your links. I have a Google sheet that has all of that ready, so I can just copy and paste into whatever format someone asks me for, right? So I try to help people with those little things that I know will set them up for success, but will also be better for the host that they're working with. I think the biggest challenge with podcast guesting that I have found myself as well as others is we all do it differently, right? We all find guests, schedule guests, decide who we really want on shows in a different process. And that can be overwhelming to the guests because they feel like it's so different. They have to spend a lot of time applying or preparing differently for each one. So that's something I really try to help people with, is to realize there are a lot of options. That's why we love podcasting, but you can be a good guest in a lot of different ways. So that's a lot of what I do with that, is just trying to help people be prepared and set up for success. But also, a couple hot tips I like to say is, please don't reach out to a host to be on their podcast if you've never listened to it. I get those cold DMs and emails all the time. And especially for my pet podcast, I pretty quickly go, yeah, this is great. I love what you do, but it has nothing to do with pets. So I don't think you're a good fit. And I get that's fine, but that's also wasting my time to respond to people that really have nothing to do with what I'm doing with that podcast specifically.
Yeah, and just on what you were discussing there, like say the forms, in my form I tell them this is video as well, because and sometimes the odd time a person would be not comfortable, and I just have a little chat before and make them relaxed, because some people are really, they're nervous about it, and that's okay. And I even, like if you're coaching people, like sometimes it's that they think, I just want to do the audio. And I kind of say, yeah, you're missing an audience, because not everybody just listens to audio. Loads of people want to watch a show. And, like you could have more views on a YouTube channel. So why would you turn that tap off?
That's such a good point, because I am asked that by my clients who I'm helping launch. So should I do video? And it's kind of like, why wouldn't you? Because especially if you're recording in the video, you got to use it. You don't have to edit it highly if you don't want to, but it's such a important part of the evolution of podcasting. So I agree. It's like there is no downside to using something you already have to tap into a different audience, because people who like to watch video, they're not necessarily going to go into a podcast app and listen. There's a reason they like that format. And I also have to say, YouTube makes it very easy to put your podcast up on their, on YouTube, on your channel. I love that there's separate tabs, for playlists and podcasts. So they make it really simple. It's just a matter of setting it up so it's not, again, another added time waste for you.
And like you've said an important thing there, no, that a lot of people might realize, but when you do playlists, because I have playlists of all my 6 shows, and when I'm editing or putting it up on YouTube and I hit that playlist, then when they're going through the show notes, they'll see the little box with, say, the pod fodder, and they can click and it'll show them all the episodes. So,
yeah.
But if you don't set it up properly, nobody does that, and you just assume people are going to go in and find it. But that's the thing. Don't make assumptions. Make it easy for everybody. That's the thing.
So I think Assuming thing is a big one in a lot of ways for podcasting. Don't assume people know how to do this or how to find you or whatever it is, because you really just want to make sure they can get to you the easiest, fastest way.
When I started off, and 7 years of it, I was asking people for reviews, and people were asking me, what's a podcast? So I can imagine people that have started, 10, 15 years ago, like what they had to go through. So I know it's changed a lot since, because there was so many got created in the last 4 or 5 years. But yeah, there was times. So I know you touch on 10 ways your podcast can grow your business. And, like a load of people are going, why should I have it? Or how can I monetize and everything? So I'd love you to talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I always preface that with podcasting is kind of a long game. It's not an instant fix. You're not in your first 5 episodes going to see this huge boom in your sales or your email list. It's a long game, which is great to have because we want to invest time in our business, but it's going to take time and money to start up and to get to a point where you see it helping. But there are so many benefits. One is having your own podcast. You own it. It's your content. You get to choose what that looks like, what format, how long, all the things. But you get to showcase yourself. You get to showcase your expertise, your what you know how to do, how you've helped clients. So I think the one big thing that I say to people about your business, if people ask you questions about what you do and how you can help them, you can point them to your podcast. Oh, you want to learn about podcast guesting? Go listen to this episode. I go in depth on how to be a great guest, right? So for me, it's a really important place, not just for content, but for showing people what I do in my business and how I could help them specifically in different ways. It's also a great place, people rely really heavily on social media, but we all know we have very little control over who sees our content and how often. So I always tell people the great thing about podcasting for your business is if I have this big thing come up or a big question or a new thing in podcasting or guesting that people want to know about, I could record it right now and put it out and everybody can learn. So it really gives you instant connection, but you can also respond to your client's needs, to your niche's needs, to changing industry. So for me, podcasting for your business is a big bonus of being able to talk about things to shift to new needs. Like me, I'm talking more about guesting than I was about launching because that's what people are asking me for. So now I can get more content on my podcast about that and point people to it. And then the other benefit is as you know, it's evergreen. It doesn't go anywhere. I have friends who haven't put out a new episode in a year or two, and they still have people listening. They're still getting people into their world, their funnel, their whatever, because the podcast is still out. It's still relevant. So that's definitely a big plus. And it's a marketing tool that you can utilize and repurpose in so many ways that it's almost like, why wouldn't you want to do that for your business, right? So those are some of the big ones. But I also talk about how you can really set up your podcast specific to your business. So one of the things I've seen some of my clients do, and I'm going to be doing more of, is actually coaching people in my podcast episodes. So you can actually have people listen to people struggling with a certain topic or need, how you would help them. And they're like, oh my gosh, I'm going to go sign up right now so she can do this for me. So there's just so many options, which can be overwhelming, but it's also, you can make connections with people, possibly potential clients, in ways that you really can't do with an email list or a social media post.
I mean, like even with the stuff you're sharing, that's why I share a lot of stuff. But even with people trying to get me to do YouTube, it's the person that comes along and tells me so much that I go, I want to work with that person. Not the guy
Right.
that's actually just talking for and expecting you to have belief in them. And a lot of people are afraid to give their value because they think, oh, I'm giving too much. But like there's so much to learn in podcasting that,
Right.
and plus when you're there holding their hand or they have access to your number, it makes a big difference. Like as I mentioned, I mean, I'm like yourself, I get people on a load of shows. One guy, over 250 that I got him on different shows. And one of the thing is, like, there's a lot of people, and it's a shame as well because it's hurting the industry. They don't turn up, or they're lying about their numbers. You know, they might say they got 4,000 or whatever, and he'd ask them, and they'd say 20. And like, I don't mind if somebody's got 20, because if the message is
Right.
good enough, it's all good. You know, nothing wrong with that, or 10 doesn't matter. But when they're lying about it, or even I've come across a few that they were basically, you know, they're some charge. You know, when they get massive, they can charge to do the thing. I give options. If you want to jump the queue, you can. So that's kind of what I do. But there was people saying that they had so many numbers, so many million, and it was based on something they'd done before. Like they were doing tech stuff. And when you go in, it was like 5 or something like that views. And when I told a few people, they were like, I was wondering, I got nothing from that. And it's like, I think anyone doesn't mind paying if you know you get a return.
Right.
But like, you've probably seen that as well, that there's a lot of cronies in the business, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, honesty is so important. And personally, I come from a background of I used to teach statistics. I used to do assessment and institutional research. Like, I love data. I'm a data person. And I will be the first one to say my pet podcast has been around for 3 years, but I don't have huge numbers. I don't, my
You're in the top 5%, which is
I am.
great
Thank you
achievement.
very much. I'm very proud of that top 5% because I've taken breaks when life has gotten overwhelming and I don't have time to do it. My biggest episodes are like 250, 300 downloads. It's not huge numbers, but we also have to realize the numbers aren't everything. It's that connection. It's the fact that I can go months without a new episode and I come back and people are still listening. Like there's so many ways we can use it that aren't about the numbers. And I think talking numbers and especially overflating your numbers is just a disservice to you because honesty is important in all aspects of business, but also no one is going to blow up to thousands of downloads overnight. That just doesn't happen unless you're already famous or already have some big thing people know you of and are instantly going to all be subscribing. So I agree. I don't like that. And also, I think it also hurts the new podcasters because like on social, you see people talking about their big numbers and, oh, I got this many downloads. And it's like, well, that's not realistic. And you're not showing them all the work it took to get you to that point, right? So yeah, I totally agree. It's really important to be upfront and honest, especially when it comes to your guests, because I tell people that all the time. They may say this episode's going to come out next week and I get this many downloads, but stuff can change and it could be 3 months from now or next year and it won't be as relevant to what you're talking about right now.
Oh, very good. So, monetization, you talked about kind of the business, but I see you've got the Merc shop. I tried that at one stage and it was like you had to put in graphics and stuff like that. But I think you've got a good niche because of animals and people like the things. But I'm just wondering, did it take much to set up, and how is it worth the effort of having a merch shop?
Right now I would say no. I think one of the reasons I've done merch shops and tested out a few times is because I'm the person who loves merch. I love a cute t-shirt with a cat or a dog on it. And um, I think right now in the world, we're all watching where we're spending money, right? And so what I've found with specifically my pet podcast and Dewey merch, I do have some people buy it, but it's not huge numbers because I think people would rather take that $25 and donate it directly to an animal rescue organization or buy supplies or, something like that. And I totally understand that. So I loved the merch because last month when I spoke at Podfest, I got to wear my merch. And then that way people are very obviously seeing who I am and what I do. And I was able to wear my pet pod merch for that talk and then my other merch for my panel on storytelling. So it isn't, and it's the merch shop I use, it doesn't cost me anything to set it up and have them have it up on a website. So that's the benefit for me is yes, it costs my time to set it up and play with what the different t-shirt designs are, but it's sitting there right now, even when people aren't buying, doesn't cost me anything. So I'm not losing money by doing it. And shout out to Bonfire. I love them. They're a great platform. Again, it's free and they're really about contributing and, fundraising. So, in that perspective, it doesn't take a lot of my time away. And it is something that allows me to be creative and try different things, but also getting to see people wearing the shirts, even if it's just a few of them, still makes me happy. And they're also still, by wearing my shirt, other people are going to learn about my podcast. So that makes it worth it for me.
Yeah. I think, it was actually my brother got me the Podfather t-shirt. And I think it's a great way because, you should do it more often. And it depends on the commission. Because I know I set up one, I think it is still organized, but there's all different ones. There's loads of companies who reach out. Some are giving like 10% commission and others up to 30. But like, I don't think you get more than 30. I don't know. Bonfire.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, and with Bonfire, you can adjust your prices if you want to, like, so you can get more or less. But I don't like to do that. I think some of the shirts give me $5, some give me 10. It just depends, per shirt of what I actually get. But it's also me supporting Bonfire, which is a company that I like and I like the services they provide. So it's also giving some support to them. And I think that's a big question for people when it comes to any kind of affiliate marketing or sponsors is not only how much money you get, but what is the mutual benefit and relationship, and that's really important for me. I do that a lot more with my pet podcast because I'm just wanting to support it and keep it going. Whereas Podcast Your Story Now is directly tied to my coaching business. So I don't want to do sponsors or affiliates because I'm the sponsor. My coaching business is the sponsor. And it's funny because I heard a talk at Podfest about this that was kind of like, oh, right. Like I needed somebody else to say it to remind me that I don't need ads in my podcast because I'm the ad. I'm selling myself as a coach, as a community organizer. So I think that's also important to think about too.
No, that's what I mean, sometimes you get sponsored in, but like all my stuff now, even my affiliates, they're the virtual assistants, the podcasting and stuff like that, because I want to help people, but at the end of the day, you're doing it to kind of grow your own, be able to put a roof over your head, food on the
Right.
table, and it benefits. So I know you have a blog as well, and I'm just curious, has a blog helped get listeners or helped the podcast?
I would say with my pet podcast for sure, because I'm able to take an episode and convert it into a blog post. But cute pictures of kittens and puppies pulls people in pretty easily. And I will say that obviously marketing for my pet podcast versus my other is very different. I love the fact that I can use animals to bring people in, but I love a blog because it's just another way to kind of express yourself and tell your story that's different than audio. But I also like it because you can have lots of links. It's a great way to generate traffic to your website. Shout out to Podpage because they give so many different options for that. And it's really easy to take what you have and convert it, whether you write it yourself or you upload it to AI. I've used Capshow. I've also used Cast Magic, both are which great podcast AI platforms. So I could just upload my audio and it generates the post and then I can go through and rewrite it and take out things. So what I like about it is I can also put in links to other things. So especially with the pet podcast, if I'm saying, hey, do you want to be a foster? These are the 5 things or 10 things I think you need to be ready to be a great foster. I've fostered kittens. I learned by doing that I like these bottles or this heating pad or whatever it is. So with that podcast, I found the blog really does not only generate traffic to my website, it gets more listeners to my podcast, but I'm also able to provide content in a different way. Whereas like with my podcast, if I have all of that in my show notes, it can be a little overwhelming and people may miss the thing that they actually wanted to get more info on and look at using for themselves.
And I see a lot of the graphics that you've got, they're kind of like cartoony, which I like because it's everything about marketing is grabbing your attention. And I think the different posts and stuff you've got, like, it's like, oh, this is colorful. This looks interesting. So is that something you've been doing from the start, or is it something that kind of evolved with time?
I would say both. I From the start I've been very much me, showing up with my love of pink and other bright colors. That's always been who I am. It's definitely evolved. I've realized I've been able to do more of it as I've grown. And with my new podcast, I really went with the pop art kind of images like you're talking about, and I really love it. I've had so many people say it stands out in a feed. It grabs your attention when you look at my website, and so part of it is I've learned that yes, those bright colors are going to grab people's attention. And then the other part is that's what I love. I love colorful things. I love wearing bright colors. So for me, it's been kind of a natural progression to just own that and show up in that way and utilize it to its fullest. And yeah, I really enjoy doing it, but it's also just the colors that I respond to and what I like to wear myself. So, and that kind of goes into the merch too, is responding to what people like and what they don't like. So, a lot of it is what I like and what I think will grab people's attention, but I also ask for feedback. And so, a lot of my feedback is, I love your website. I love your post. I love your colors. So, sometimes you just got to try it and see what people think too.
That's right. I mean, social media is, yeah, it's a minefield. And what I'd like to start off with is just a previous guest that I've had on. He was talking about threads, and it was something I went in and then I heard, it didn't really work. But he's saying he's getting a lot of followers from it. He said it's not massive, not that many, but he's getting people that are going. And I'm just curious, like, what's your experience with threads?
I haven't used it a lot. I started the account early on when it came out and played with it a little, but like you said, you weren't seeing a lot of movement. But I think that it's another platform that's great to check in on if you want. And it's a different kind of platform than everything else. It's very similar to Twitter in some ways because it's more about the comment or the caption, less about the image or the video, which I like because it can be overwhelming video after video, like in Instagram. I do like Threads too because it's kind of a conversation starter. Like you can put a post out and it kind of evolves as people comment and put in their 2 cents or whatever it may be. And one of the things a lot of people have asked me about is getting listener engagement and buy-in. And so I do think Threads is a great place to do that because it's a great place for me to go on and say, hey, what topic do you want me to talk about on my podcast next week? And people can, give me topics and then I can come back and say, great, I did an episode all about, how to apply to be a podcast guest. And they're like, oh, she listened to me. Now I have my answers. So I do think Threads is great in that. And I would like to utilize it more. And I have had this conversation a couple times recently where people are struggling, myself included, to show up for solo episodes where it's just me talking or me sharing. And so I think asking your listeners, your followers, whether it's Threads or Instagram, what is a question you have for me? What is a myth you want me to debunk? Whatever that may be, helps me realize what content I can start talking about. But then I also know people want to learn it, so people are going to listen. So I haven't used Threads a lot, but I'm definitely going to be testing out some of that with it.
And I see you use Pinterest as well. It's something I could never get any engagement with, but I was like looking. I mean, for you, I think it's perfect because like pictures. I mean, what can I put up with, said Polish or whatever? Do you put up the episode? I was trying it and I never got much in game. But for what you're doing, I think it depends on the podcast as well because like with search engine optimization, apparently Pinterest works very well. And like if you've got kittens and puppies and then or the episode what you're doing, I think it helps. So is your experience like that it's helped benefited?
I think so. I honestly have not put in much effort in it over the last year. So all of my pins were probably from the first couple of seasons of my pet podcast. But yeah, and this is what people don't realize about Pinterest versus other social media, that it is more like a Google search engine than it is a social media platform. And it's all about the images. It's all about the photos and videos a little bit. So I actually started using it when I started the blog for my pet podcast because I saw it as a natural fit to use the images from my blog as pins, but then drive traffic to my website, which inevitably means people are going to listen to the podcast, right? So for me, that was a great fit. I haven't used it at all for my podcast coaching for my other podcasts, because like you said, it's not as image based. And again, pet podcasts are great because you get to show cute animals and people like to look at those. So I do like Pinterest, and I know a lot of people use it for things that could easily connect. I have a friend who's starting a podcast about crafting. And I'm like, well, go to Pinterest because that is the right place for you. So I think that is a big tip for new podcasters, is understand what each platform is good for before you decide to be on all 10 of them. Right? So I'm not going to be on Pinterest for my podcast about podcasting, but I am going to be more on LinkedIn for my podcast about podcasting, because that's where podcasters are. That's where podcast guests are. So I think it's really important for people to understand how each place can benefit your podcast and or business before you put a lot of effort into showing up there.
Thoroughly enjoyed the conversation, Julie. You might let people know where they can find you.
Yeah, you can find me at juliemartypearson.com, as well as on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and you can catch my pet podcast at thestoryofmypetpodcast.com.
Well, I'll make sure I put the link spot on the audio in the video. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
That's all for the Podfather. As mentioned at the start, you'll find everything about me. Just scan the QR code. You'll see my 6 podcasts, virtual assistant, everything else I'm doing, or rycon.com. Until next week, take care.